The hospitalizations in the country for COVID are unvaccinated people. It never occurred to me after 3 highly effective vaccines were developed in under a year that we'd have difficulty getting Americans to take the shots. But that's obviously where we are. I want to underscore in the strongest possible manner I can, and I say this with some authority, as you all know, as a result of being a polio victim myself and being very aware that it took 7 decades to come up with 2 effective polio vaccines. This was done in under 1 year. These shots need to get in everybody's arm as rapidly as possible, or we're going to be back in a situation in the fall that we don't yearn for, that we went through last year.
Well, today marks 6 months of the Biden presidency, and that's 6 months that the situation at the border continues to spiral out of control without solutions in sight. If you look at the data itself, 188,000 people were encountered at the border last month. That's the highest number literally in 20 years. Add to that the fact that in this fiscal year there have already been 1 million arrests at the border, and you can see that the current administration isn't doing anything to address a crisis which frankly is of its own making. Many of the policies that they changed when they came into office were effective and were working, and now we have a major humanitarian and national security crisis at our border, and the way that this administration is handling it is reckless to say the least. And speaking of reckless, you look at the economic data these days, inflation is spiraling out of control, continues to hit highs that we haven't seen in a really long time, which drives up the cost for lower and middle income Americans the most, whether it's a stop at the grocery store or the gas station or the hardware store. It goes on and on. What we are seeing is an economic trend that is really concerning for many, many Americans, complicated by this administration's policies, which now include another proposed $5 trillion in spending, stimulus spending. My understanding is the Democrat leader was out here earlier talking about how the economy is taking off like a rocket. Well, all the spending that they're putting out there is adding gasoline to the fire, and it is exploding on the American people. And that is not going to be something that's going to be sustainable for the long term, certainly in a way that is of any benefit to the American people who right now, as I said, are suffering the cost of this. I hope that the administration will come to the conclusion that their reckless tax and spending spree needs to come to an end for the benefit of the American people.
The Democrats seem to be determined to bankrupt America. This spending spree, it's a reckless tax and spending spree. It really does seem to be Bernie's effort to socialism. It's his manifesto. It is the ultimate liberal wish list. It's taxes, it's regulations, it's spending, and to me this is radical, extreme, dangerous, and scary, because the American people will end up paying for it. Middle-class taxpayers will have to foot the bill. Families all across the country are already paying more than they were 6 months ago when Joe Biden came to office. $25 more to fill your tank, $25 more when you go to the grocery store for a weekly shopping. That's what inflation is about. That's how it impacts families. That's the gasoline on the flame of inflation. And to listen to Democrats say, well, only some rich people and some businesses will end up paying for this, the American people will not be deceived. They can see through this. They know they will be left holding the bill. And now you listen to Democrats in the House. They say that this $3.5 trillion bill, and they called it a down payment and a good start, because to them, nothing is too extreme, nothing is too expensive. Mark my words on this, there is not one single Republican in the House or in the Senate who will pay or vote for this reckless tax and spending bill, not a one. To get this bill passed, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are going to have to make every Democrat walk the plank.
I've had a hard time figuring out what the Democratic leader is doing with this vote tomorrow. I think it's not going to turn out to be a hard vote for almost every Republican to decide we're not going to vote to proceed to a bill that doesn't exist yet. This is not a very high standard to set. We want to have a bill to go to before we vote to go to a bill. Now, I don't know if this is an effort to kill the bipartisan effort or to speed it up. If it's an effort to do anything but kill the bipartisan effort, the majority leader can easily accept a vote that doesn't go to the bill and be willing to bring it up at a quick future time. All he has to do is change his vote to the prevailing side and be willing to bring that up at a later time. What point's being made by not having a bill and voting to go to a bill that doesn't exist is something I'm still trying to figure out.
80% of Americans are concerned about inflation. 80%. And yet President Biden seems to poo-poo this away like it's no big deal. But what he doesn't understand, it is impacting everyday Americans' pocketbooks. Our essentials are going up in cost, whether it's milk, it's diapers, it's gas to fill up our tanks. It is impacting everyone. And yet the Democrats are proposing another tax and spend spree, another $3.4 trillion, folks, with a T, trillion. When did it become acceptable for us to start tossing around things like trillions of dollars? Okay, the American people are concerned, President Biden and Democrats. They are concerned, and yet their concern is falling on deaf ears. Again, every essential item that they need for their family is going up in cost right now, and we need to do something to address it. And that's by getting our economy up and going again. So again, $3.4 trillion for a fancy Democratic wish list, but it truly is taxing and spending in a spree that we have never seen in this country before. And who's going to pay for it? Our hardworking American taxpayers. It falls on their shoulders, folks. Make no bones about it. It is hardworking Americans that will be paying for their reckless spending.
Democrats say that it's not them that's trying to kill the bipartisan infrastructure bill, but Republicans by not voting on this motion to proceed tomorrow, pointing to the fact that it's been done many times. So what is your response? Are you wanting this bill to die?
Senator Blunt covered that. The majority leader will not be slowed down by having this motion to proceed to the bill defeated. All that does is give him the opportunity to move to reconsider, and at whatever point the bipartisan deal comes together, we can reconsider the vote, and then he'd have the option to lay that down as a substitute. In other words, no time is lost by adhering to a very simple principle. We're not going to the bill until we know what the bill is. Yeah.
You've been vocal back in Kentucky, particularly about ending the UI plus up, the COVID relief money that's gone out. Are you concerned about shutdowns and the possibility for all of this inflation that you all have talked about, for some of that to be hitting Americans at home again if they're asked to stay home with an increase in cases?
Well, what I'm concerned about at the moment is paying people more to stay home than to go back to work. 25 states have discontinued the federal $300 a week bonus. It's having a positive effect. I'll give you an example. I was on a Zoom call recently with some people in my state who also run businesses in Indiana. The Kentucky governor has said we want to keep the bonus. The Indiana governor said no thanks. The very next day after the Indiana governor said we're going to discontinue the $300 a week bonus, they got 200 job applications. I'm hearing that from everyone. In addition to the wave of inflation that you've already heard all of us talking about, the economy does not need this tax and spending spree. It's lifting on its own as we come out of this. The way to defeat getting back into the position we were last year is to get vaccinated. This is not complicated. 97% of the people who are in the hospital now for COVID are unvaccinated. So if there's anybody out there willing to listen, get vaccinated.
Leader McConnell, on that note, the Republican governor of Utah said this weekend that conservative talking heads are, quote, literally killing their supporters. Would you speak out against people who are actually speaking out against the vaccine?
I don't know how I could be any more clear than I have been. I've been saying the same thing about vaccinations all along the way. Others can say whatever they choose to say, but this is something I think I'm a good example of, something I know the answer to. It is not at all unclear that the way to avoid getting back in the hospital is to get vaccinated. I want to encourage everybody to do that and to ignore all of these other voices that are giving demonstrably bad advice.